I'm going to remain calm.
Okay, me too. Good evening and welcome to Raconteurs News. There's the new intro for you. You're the first people to see it outside of me and my wife. I did it yesterday. I had to wait until it was dark and everything. Anyway, welcome to Raconteurs News, untwisted, unsweetened news as we move towards the end of 2021. And towards whatever we've got coming our way in 2022. Right. Well, it's no secret who my guest is this evening, so I'm just going to bring him straight in. Good evening to you, Neil Sanders. How you doing, my old friend? Your mic's muted a little bit.
Yeah. Hello, mate. I'm really good. I love that intro. Like, I don't think I'll be the only at the beginning when you're coming up with the lift, it reminded me of the beginning of Quantum Leap.
All right, okay.
Yeah, where he's in the thing and where all the steam's coming up, as A says.
That's the thing. I should have got a smoke. I used to be a DJ. I should have got a smoke machine still, but
brilliant. Love it.
That would have been good, but no. Anyway, we've got loads of comments already. Can you see the comments? Everything?
I'm choosing to ignore the comments.
That was cool. Thank you. Right, thank you. Yeah, thanks for everybody's feedback on the intro. I did that yesterday. I've been meaning to do it for ages. Evening, Jason. Even chat. Evening, Smarmy. Oh dear me, they're starting off with the insults early. Anyway, I know it is going to be
such as pearls.
Anyway, we are going to be talking about the article that you wrote that I've read. I was going to read it again today, but I've had just such a busy day, which is unheard of in my circle, my little bubble. But I have read it, and so I've put it everywhere for everyone else to read, and I've urged people to read it before they listen. But if they haven't, they will probably still have all the same arguments that everybody else has. So I'd like to start off by asking you, when you wrote that article, what was your intentions? What was behind that? What was your motive? Because it's everybody's. You knew that it weren't going to be received very well by, especially by the alternative media, which you go into some detail about. So what was your motives behind that?
Well, I just wanted to clear some stuff up, because there's a concept called false premise, which basically means that if you assume something to be true and then you build a sort of theory on top of that, and then it becomes what's called a trope or a truism. And so I just wanted to look at some of the things that were still being said around and examine them to see if they were true, and basically, objectively look at them and see what evidence there is for them. Because I think it ties into a wider thing. I think basically there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation in what we would call the conspiracy world, for want of a better phrase, alternative media, let's call it, right? Okay. Now, I think that's on purpose, because put quite simply, like, since the advent of like YouTube and social media and stuff like that, the intelligence agencies have been looking at certain things. Like GCHQ was looking at a program called JTRIG, which is basically introducing false information into what they considered to be enemies of the state's echo chambers in order to create confusion. Now, they say that this is for terrorists abroad, but it's for basically anybody that would be opposed to the British government. There's other sort of programs like things like Sentient Worlds, Sentient Worlds Simulation, sorry, which was done by America, which basically, the long and short of it is that all of these different programs, they utilize social media to create echo chambers. And what they've done is they've looked at how to introduce information into things and red herrings. And so my sort of take on this is that since Columbine, really, and since the advent of social media and the sort of the more immediacy of information, and particularly YouTube, I think that there's been a lot of misinformation pumped into the alternative media. I think this is why you're getting a lot of stuff like, all of a sudden, I'll put it this way, everybody kind of figured out Columbine, or at least basically were able to notice discrepancies in it. And then you've got online, you've got message boards and stuff like that, so people are talking about it and they're spreading this sort of, hang on, it looks like there were more shooters, the bombs had like military grade hardware, that type of thing. So this information gets around. There was Virginia Tech after that, but the one that happened after that was Sandy Hook. And all of a sudden, there was the introduction of things like everything is fake, like, you know, it's all crisis actors, nothing really happens. Following on from that, we had Flat Earth. We also had a bit where basically everybody was fabulously thinking that Hitler was great. Then we had things like the introduction of QAnon. And I think that QAnon also came from the same place as Cambridge Analytica, which I've discussed before. I don't know if I've discussed it on here, but, you know, it was the MI5 program that was utilized to direct people towards voting for Brexit and towards voting for Donald Trump. And so with that in mind, why would this happen? Because essentially there's a lot of people online, all the people in the comments, they're all interested in finding out the truth. They're all interested in rooting out tyranny, rooting out crimes, essentially, and rooting out crimes against humanity. And so what better way to stop people from investigating that? That's a good point, Alistair. Mandela effect too. Like, and dinosaurs are fake, and, all of this sort of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that's quite out there and quite sort of like, huh, really? Now, I've
seen one. I'm sorry, Neil, but I've seen one that suggests that Australia doesn't even exist.
Yes, I've seen that one as well. Or that birds are robots. That's also a good one. Like, birds never have existed. They're robots. They're in the employ of the government to spy on you. Like that's one that's out there as well. But anyway, so you've got all these like-minded and intelligent searching people that want to find answers, that are looking for information, and they're going out there trying to solve these crimes. Now, the whole purpose of all of these GCHQ and American CIA and DARPA programs is to introduce narratives, is to get there first and introduce, for want of a better phrase, red herrings. And I think this is essentially what's happened with COVID. And the reason that they're doing that is because basically, let's take something like No Children Died at Sandy Hook. It does several things. It demonizes the people who are making that statement. It's one of those things that's so reactive that your normie, for want of a better phrase, is going to go, that's despicable. I'm not going to conscious it, and I'm also just not going to take you seriously anymore. So unfortunately it rolls into that. Also, what it does is it limits investigation, because if you've already decided that that's what happened, you're going to dismiss anything else as it's not. So by introducing these red herrings into the sort of field of conspiracy, they can create the echo chambers first. And I think that's kind of what happened with COVID, to my mind, is that a number of things happened. One, when they first started announcing that there was a pandemic, because basically we don't trust the media, because we know that the media is essentially politicized or commercialized and it has agendas, a lot of people went, well, whatever is said on the news, the opposite must be true. And it really isn't quite as simple as that. That's called contrarianism. It's not free thinking. It's not independent thought. It's not, it becomes a mantra. And then once you sort of become stuck in that mindset, you're a lot easier to manipulate. If I know that if I showed you a story from the Sun, say, and I knew that you would immediately think that the opposite was true, well, that gives me an opportunity to start messing with you. I could put in, say, true stories that you would then believe to be false because of the medium that they came through. Now, the problem as well is exacerbated by social media, because when people said, like, say, they say there's a pandemic, so we believe that the opposite to be true, this, you know, creates a sort of buzz. It's rather difficult to go back on what you've previously said or to go against the grain. I mean, I'm living proof of that. There's to be people cursing me out just for thinking differently right now in the comment section, because it opens up possibilities, and people like to have closed loops. People like to understand what's happening. They don't like to have unknowns. So it would be like letting your followers or supporters down. They also might turn against you, and then you get to lose all those clicks and that sort of lucrative subscribers and stuff like that. The other problem is that basically you whenever you've got a major event, like anything, like you've also got people who are what would be called doom porn merchants. Like, now there's a lot of stuff that's talked about basically saying, oh, the media spreads fear, the media does this, and they're absolutely right, but so do conspiracies. Like, you know, for example, the conspiracy that, well, this is the first step before we're all being rounded up into gulags or mass murdered or whatever. There's a lot of fear porn that is put out through the alternative media. Some of it has elements of truth, some of it is completely true. Some of it is just there because it's entertainment and it gets people noticed, it gets people attention, and ultimately it gets people money. Then there's a third aspect that's very, very problematical about the pandemic, is that the government themselves admittedly is feeding misinformation into the sphere of both the alternative and the mainstream media through the nudge unit and through Surgru communications and through the HM Treasury, through a think tank called Insight. Now, why would they be introducing all of this? Well, it comes down to basically what they want to achieve from the scenario. And I know that everybody sort of kind of got on the idea that the point was to permanently lock down or permanently control. And I'm sure that there's some people that there's an element of truth to that. You know, we will make hay while the sun shines. We've got lemons, we'll make lemonade. We'll take advantage of the situation. And the government will always do that in a way that will benefit them. But the problem is that ultimately, in regards to the world scenario at the minute, the government has literally two things that it wants to achieve, right? It wants to appease its donors. It just simply wants to appease its donors, and those are the oil industry. Okay, and that's the people that are connected to, again, the HM Treasury, Economic Insight, Koch Industries, Great Barrington Declaration, PCR claims, Off Guardian, that thing that Toby Young's involved with. They finance people like Lawrence Fox. They're behind the doctors like Sunita Gupta and Carol Sikora and Martin Kulldorff and Carl Hennigan. They're also connected to Anders Tegnell from Sweden. Now, why are these people spreading disinformation? Because, as I said, they work for the oil companies. They literally work for the oil companies. Well, they don't literally, but they are in the employ of the oil companies. And what did the oil companies want? They wanted things to mainly stay open. They wanted people back in the office. They wanted people on the trains, wanted things on the tube. And this is why we never, ever shut the airports coming in. because oil went into negative equity. And so to appease the donors, and this was basically said at the Tory meeting in the beginning of last year, that they wouldn't shut these things down because they would try and lessen the hit to their donors, basically lessen the hit to their donors. And now, assuming that you believe that viruses are real and that COVID is a thing, etc., 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 why is that problematic? Well, that's problematic because by not introducing mitigating circumstances, ultimately the people that or the industry that gets it in the neck the most is the NHS. That is the people who are going to take the brunt of it. And basically, that is ultimately what the government wants. The government has been attempting to privatise the NHS since 1981. It's had the opportunity with Brexit that was going to be part of the US trade deal, which collapsed when Trump lost. But they don't need that trade deal anymore, specifically for this aspect of it. What they can do is they can literally just run it into the ground to the point where it requires some private industry to come and pick up the slack, basically. And the cruel thing about that as well is that even though that is the ultimate goal, is to destroy the NHS, when that happens, the people that will be blamed, it won't be the government, because the government strategy throughout the entire pandemic has been not to act at all until the public is in a state where they're clamoring for some sort of action. They don't know what specifically, but they just want somebody to be seen to be doing something, at which point the government says, well, we'll do this, but be on your own head, be it. And if anything goes wrong, it's your fault. At the same time, what they've done is they've basically got two sets of scientists, one saying one thing, lockdown, wear masks, vaccinate heavily, etc., 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 work from home. The other side saying the complete opposite, which is basically let it rip. Let it run through society. So either way, the government has a set of scientists to blame. And when this is all done and the NHS gets overwhelmed, they won't blame the politicians for their poor handling of it, because they've got the scientists to blame. Who are they going to blame? They've already started it in the Daily Mail and in the Telegraph and the Times and the Mirror. They're going to blame the alternative media. They're going to blame people like Kate Shremarani and Piers Corbyn and those people that tried to serve the Nuremberg Code to that hospital today. Those are the people that are going to get blamed. That doesn't make logical sense, but this is what people will do in a crisis. They will look for somebody to blame, and it will be easy to blame these people who don't have a forum to respond and are generally considered to be wacky by the general populace than the government. That's what's going to happen. And so it's multifaceted. I think, again, there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation that's floating around about the pandemic, and I don't blame people. I don't blame people for example, you were saying before that you didn't know anybody that had been ill with it, or you didn't know anybody that was seriously ill. And I don't know whether that's changed, but it doesn't really matter, because I was sat there thinking, like, that's unusual. And I thought, no, it's not actually. It's not surprising at all. It's one of those things. Recently, somebody that I know had a heart attack. And it suddenly struck me that I'm 40 years old and I never knew a single person that had had a heart attack up until that point. Not a single one. And there's millions every year. And I don't doubt that. Oh, well, I didn't know that. I was not aware of that. I'm sorry to hear that.
But I had my first one at 27, so
Christ,
I'm not younger than 40.
What the fuck were you doing, Jason?
I was playing football.
Really?
I was playing football.
Wow. The point being that there's often, it's not as surprising as all that. The world is quite a big place, and in order, it wouldn't. I'm not actually surprised anymore that certain people don't know people. I mean, obviously, is it like, it's not an indictment on anything really. It's a circumstance that probably happens far more often than we give credit for. But yeah, that's my concern, is that basically, as I say, some people sort of jumped on it because of they sort of leapt too soon, so to speak. Some of them are just grifters. Some people out there have basically taken advantage of this situation and and just want to make money of it. Like, as I say, it's either selling fear porn or the opposite, which is basically just telling you exactly what you want to hear, like whether it be true or not. And then I think the third problem is that you have actively got the government being purposely poor in their messaging, being purposely poor in their strategies, so that it doesn't make sense, so that people are sick to bloody death of everything, so that it seems contradictory, so that there's public images of the like, well, why is he not wearing a mask and I have to wear a mask? Why is he allowed to go on holiday and I'm not allowed to go on holiday? This is all by design.
Victim mentality. It's manufacturing victim mentality in people, which is what race does. I mean, racism is everywhere now. There's all these different racism organizations trying to kick it out.
Yeah. Well, people like to be offended as well. This is the point, like, particularly again, like, you know, when you are locked down, not able to go to work or whatever. I mean, let's be honest, the last year was boring, wasn't it? It was a bloody boring year. And everybody was on the internet looking for stuff, looking for things to be entertained by. And this is the other point, right? Okay. Can you remember when things like Wayfair came out and they were like, they said that they were shipping children in like cabinets or something, or when you went on the Wayfair site, you would pay for a cabinet, but actually it was secret code for buying a child that you would sexually molest. Okay, the reason that well, it was not true anyway, but the reason that sort of got traction is because it what's the way for it? It ticked the boxes. It was like, oh, it's this, oh, it's this, oh, it's this, oh, it's this. Now, it didn't tick the boxes because those boxes were real. It ticked the boxes because it was marketed. Like, and because basically the intelligence agencies have been looking at conspiracy theorists or alternative media, whatever you want to, as a group for the last probably like 10, 15 years. And they've been studying their habits and how to manipulate them, how to be the best one. It's no, like, people didn't notice that certain people came onto the scene at the start of this pandemic. All they do is talk about the pandemic, and they've gone from a complete unknown to being really, really popular and stuff like that. That can happen sometimes, but they're all saying exactly the same thing, selling exactly the same thing, and not experiencing the same level of pushback that other people would be for espousing the same sort of things. You've got people that basically somehow, like, you know, getting caught doing crimes again and again and again and being let off in the courts, or being able to set up like massive GoFundMes to sort of like, you know, just basically just like to absorb any like problems that might occur from the doing of this thing. And I don't think this is on. I don't think that's. I think that's part of it. I think that there's again, it does two things. It directs people to a particular school of thought that is very difficult to get out of, because once you're in that group, and it's also presented, because again, don't get me wrong, it's like let's use the idea of QAnon, right? Nobody that was into QAnon was a bad person. Nobody went into it for bad reasons. Everybody went into it because they wanted to be a patriot, they wanted to fight for goodness, and they wanted to save children or whatever. Okay, but that's the point. You can use those valiant and admirable qualities, and you can twist that, and you can manipulate people by doing that. And again, basically, they've had so many years of watching us, and this and like, you know, being able to say, oh, okay, this hits, this doesn't hit, this will be taken on board, this won't be taken on board, and very good. Yeah, so that's my concern, and that's why I wanted to write the article, because again, a lot of the things were just frankly not true. And a little hysterical sometimes. And so I just wanted to write a fair article. I've not really had a go at anybody. I've just looked at the information, looked at the tropes. And here's the thing about finding out whether something is, because researching is bloody difficult, right? Okay, I'm not trying to pretend that I'm an expert on it, but one thing that I have found is to try and figure out whether something is true or not, or to get a better impression of whether something is true or not, is to not look at the statement itself, is to look at where that statement came from, or where that fact came from, who presented it to the world, or how it came about. And then you can look at the validity of it. Because if you're exactly, it's like, well, this is coming from this person. It's like, if I was to say, like, right, okay, like, well, I found this this thing that says that people that listen to heavy metal, particularly the more extreme heavy metal, they're known to be the sexiest people on earth. So of course you're going to say that, Neil. You're biased. You're wearing a Venom t-shirt. Like, do you see what I mean? And so you might look at that information with more of a degree of skepticism, because it's like, well, hang on, Neil was bound to say that. I mean, we'll check it out anyway. We will look at it and see if it's real. But you could see my motivation for spreading that information. You could see why it would be in my interest to spread false information. So that's what I tried to do with everything, is to look at each. Yes, exactly. It is hopium, but that's kind of the point, is to get people whipped up and get them into right. I don't mean this in the way that it's going to sound, but I'm going to talk about cults. And what I'm not saying that anybody that believes in any conspiracy theory is in a cult. What I'm saying is this is how cults work, and it's also how advertisers work. What they do is very, very simple. They tell you how the world is. They tell you what your position is in the world, usually based on a product. And then they tell you that you've got loads and loads of people that think the same. So let's take Mercedes-Benz, for example. The cult aspect of that is they tell you that Mercedes-Benz is a luxury car. You will know how luxurious your lifestyle is by how expensive your car is. And you know that that's the case because everybody else that buys a Mercedes-Benz is also into that. And everybody that buys into the advertising also knows that. And even people that don't give a shit about that sort of aspirational qualities will know that if somebody's driving down the road in a Maybach, they've probably got a few quid in the bank, right? That's it. Simple as that. So it's the same thing. Say with Q, you know your place in the world, you're fighting evil. It explains the entirety of the world in one encapsulated phrase or ideology. And it surrounds you with like-minded people, and you've all got a purpose. You've got something to live for, and you've got something that makes you more than normal, and it gives you. It makes you special, for want of a better phrase. That's not explaining it very well, but it gives you pride. Do you know what I mean? It gives you that sort of thing where you feel that you're part of an exclusive club and that perhaps you know more than other people. For example, you're in the exclusive club of Sheffield Wednesday supporters, so you surround with the like-minded, and you like, I don't like those other clubs because that's your group. There's nothing wrong with that. That's sort of like a sort of a legitimate and benign aspect of that, but this is the point. This is why all these things like the social media control things like SMISC and sentient world simulation and JTRIG and Cambridge Analytica and QAnon, and all of these things are so very, very effective, is because they play on very, very fundamental instinctual drives. The need to know, the need to understand, the need to not have uncertainty in your life, and the need to be surrounded by people who are like-minded to you that make you feel better about yourself. And that's the cruel aspect of it, because none of those things are wrong. Right? There's nothing wrong with any of those things, but those things can be manipulated to make you go down a particular path, and that's what I think has been happening.
Yeah, I mean, I've asked you one question, and we're a quarter of the way through the show.
Sorry, did I just babble on?
No, it's fine. You carry on. It's the more that you're explaining, then the more people understand where you're coming from.
Well, because I think a lot of people think that basically it's all of a sudden I'm their enemy, like because I'm thinking something that's different to them, or that I have an agenda to either make them look stupid, or that they're suspicious of me because I'm thinking something else to them. And it's really not that at all. I'm just, if anything, I could have gone along with everybody else. You know, I could have told you that it was 5G and that the tests don't work and that viruses don't exist, and set up a Patreon and set up, like, you know, a streaming channel or whatever, and told people exactly what they wanted to do. Yeah, it's tyranny, isn't it? First step towards communism, this. You're right. Why won't anybody else notice this? You're right. I could have told you that every single bloody week, right? Okay, and earned a fortune, right? But I didn't do that because I don't want to do that, right? Okay, what I want to do is to get to the bottom of things and to figure out what is true and what is not true. And so that's what is the point? Is I wanted to look at this in a slightly different way. And again, I understand why some people, because it's all born out, regardless of, like, you know, the broader media and stuff like that. Most of our understanding of the world is born out of personal experience. And if you've been lucky enough to see the negative aspects of it, if you've not seen that people, if you don't know anyone that was ill, no, he didn't, Paul. He didn't. We've gone over this many, many times. He said the complete opposite. He said that they were specifically designed to look for viruses. He didn't say they were fit for purpose. Read my article. And let's take it. Okay, let's say that he did. Who gives a fuck? You do know we don't use the same PCR. We use qPCR, which is an advantage. So him criticizing the current PCR is a bit like the Wright brothers criticizing an F-40 jet. It really isn't the same thing at all. Like, also, him saying something doesn't mean a thing. You've got to show it with practical evidence. You really need to show, like, okay, he said that. Let's find out. Because I think people think that PCR is the new thing. It's not. It's ubiquitous. It's used for anything that involves finding out DNA or RNA, which is the search for viruses, the search for certain illnesses. It's used in organ transplantation because you need to get a DNA match. It's used in paternity tests, pregnancy tests. It's used to test chlamydia. It's used to test HIV. It's ubiquitous. It has been used with nobody having a problem with it because basically it works. It's a DNA test. Like, nobody's ever said that, oh no, DNA doesn't work, does it? No, they haven't. And again, if people will start, like, we can get into this now. They'll start saying stuff like, well, if you cycle it up, you can find anything. It's like, you really can't though, could you? Because if that was the case, nobody would ever escape from a DNA profile. Everybody's DNA would be found at the crime site. If they've got a suspect, they'll just keep cycling it up until the DNA is found. Like, you can't do that. You find a dodo's DNA in your lunch. Go on, try. Cycle it as much as you like. It doesn't work like that. And this is exactly my point. This is exactly the type of misinformation that it's called a false premise. If you start with the idea that the inventor of the device said that they weren't to be used for finding viruses, then anything past that, you are quite rightly, you will say, well, why are you using them? Because I know this to be true. Unfortunately, this is the point. That's not true. That isn't the case. And so that is the perfect example of what is called a false premise fallacy, where essentially your entire thesis is based on false information that starts it. If I went out there to try and find you a partner, Jason, right, and came back with all these burly blokes, coronavirus is not specific. Yeah, yes, it is. Yes, it is. It looks for the specific genome based on the assays and primers. So yes, it is. That's just not true, Paul. And you can repeat it as much times as you like, but it is the quintessential example, I'm afraid, I'm sorry to say, because I don't want to argue, of a false premise. So there you go. So if I went out and, like, said, you want a new partner, and I went out and came back with a load of really handsome, buff guys, because I'd assumed that you were gay, well, then I've got it wrong. You see what I mean? If I'd have just found out at the beginning, like, oh no, you're not gay. Okay, fine. Well, I'll find you some ladies. I know that's a really, really silly example. Like, but do you understand that basically, if you start off on rocky ground, everything is shaky from that point onwards. And so this is the thing. And here's the other thing as well. You know who has a vested interest in spreading this disinformation? Because ultimately the NHS will cop for it. And people aren't going to like this, right? The government, because essentially it crushes the NHS, and Big Pharma, because it's going to crush the NHS. And that's going to mean more people are ill and more people are thinking. Here's the crazy thing. I don't really want to get into this, to be quite honest, but it's a fact. Quite a lot of the people who are prominent in the anti-vax movement, for example, fuck it, I'll say it, Del Bigtree is actually financed by people who invest, by billionaires who invest heavily in Microsoft and Big Pharma. You know why? Because anti-vax sentiment spread by Del Bigtree causes fluctuations in the market that his financial sponsors can make money off of. It's as simple as that, and it's cruel and it's horrible, but it's 100% true. So this is, and then the other thing that's happening by the spread of this disinformation, it's really, really simple. It's very difficult to hold the UK government to account for their malpractice and their mishandling of the situation that led to a lot of people dying and a lot of people getting ill and the eventual destruction of the NHS. It's really difficult to hold them to account if you're sat there arguing and saying there is no pandemic, there is no virus, there is no people getting ill, there's no people dying, there's no people having long COVID, there's no people in the hospitals. If you are actively pushing that, you are giving the government an alibi, and that is exactly why they push this information, because it gives the government an alibi.
Yeah. There's also there's people make assumptions. Look, you know me, you know which side of this I'm on.
Yeah.
I'm on the opposite side to you, but I'm going on basically my own
personal experience. And again, I get that, mate. And I'm not calling you a liar.
I'm just going to give you an example of how how people can make assumptions and those assumptions not be right.
Yeah.
So when I was in hospital, I told you I was in hospital just before showing back in June.
Yeah.
But it took ages to get onto a ward because all the wards were the ward that they take you on, the admissions ward, was full, and they didn't have enough wards to get people on. So I had to spend a night in the admissions ward. Then they opened up a ward.
Yeah.
Like a completely, totally only not very old ward.
Yeah.
In this new part of the building, and I thought that it'd been closed down, and I thought it had been closed down because it had been closed down, but what they've done is they cleaned it all up and then put in all sorts of equipment in it, and then went in. It were a beautiful ward. I got my own room and en suite and everything. It were great. And I thought, well, why is this not open? Why is this not open? And I assumed that they were closing wards to give the impression of being busy. Right? That was my first thought.
Understandable.
Then I find out afterwards. Again, what you're talking about. It's people have got confirmation bias.
Yes, I'm afraid so.
Yeah, and I actually got a phone call from a friend of mine who works at Northern General, and I told him I'd been in hospital, and I said I went on this ward. I said I can't believe it were closed. It were a great ward. It were beautiful. Everything inside, all brand new. It had beds where they were, they were distanced already. Before, not even for the pandemic or anything. They were distanced in the wards, and there were loads of rooms that went off the wards, and I had one of them. So I naturally assumed that it had been, not naturally, but, with my mindset, I thought, well, this has been closed because they're trying to give the impression of it being busy. Now, I found out, I had a phone call from a friend of mine who works at the Northern General, and we were talking about it, and I said to him, I said, "Oh, I were in." He says, "Oh, what ward were you on?" And I said, "Well, I were on the Hatfield ward of the Hatfield building." I said, "They opened it up." I said, "I can't believe it was closed. It's a lovely ward." He says, "Yeah." He says, "It's been closed about 4 years. It was closed due to Grenfell because they've got the same cladding on it."
You're
So,
joking.
oh, no. That was the actual reason. So, like I said, I'm agreeing with you. My confirmation bias at that time, but luckily, when somebody tells me and puts me straight, then I can take that. I can take that on board, and I will look for myself.
But that's entirely how it should be. And but again, this is exacerbated by this. Well, two things. One, because and a lot of people won't admit this, but everybody's on edge, right? Okay, everyone has been really on edge for the last year, right? Okay, and so you look for the comfort of groups. So. And you please don't think that I'm having a go at people. But if you've convinced yourself that, say, this doesn't exist, and then there's somebody saying it does, my neighbour died from it, right? That's intrusive to you. It's like, fuck off, Neil. I'm perfectly happy in this little bubble. I don't want to be told that. And again, I don't. That's come across as me sounding like I'm having a go. That's not how I intended it. It's totally understandable. You don't. Life's bloody complicated enough, right? Okay, without people adding uncertainty to you and adding sort of things that you don't want to sort of know and stuff like that. There's the concept of being blissfully ignorant and stuff like that. And it's it is one of those things. It's like, do you want to know these terrible things, or do you not want to know these terrible things? But you want to know them in a controlled way. And I think that was the thing again. Exacerbated by social media, exacerbated by these echo chambers. Basically, you've got an event that's causing huge amounts of stress on a number of levels, be that whether you're worried about the virus, or be that whether basically you're worried that you're going to be made redundant, or that basically anything. Life's really doesn't take much for people to be put into a really stressful situation, and it's in those situations that people want security. They want surety and they want solidity. What they don't want is uncertainty. Say if somebody told you there's some, we've looked at this scan, right? Okay, and this summit, right? I'll tell you the best example, right? Okay, I had a bad back, right? And it's first started by sort of muscle pain down this side. And I went to the hospital and had an ultrasound. Turns out I wasn't pregnant, but basically they were looking to see if I had a hernia, to see if I had a split in the thing, and they couldn't find a hernia, right? And the guy said to me, I said, well, if it's not a hernia, what might it be? No word of a lie, the bloke said to me, and I don't think he was even a doctor, I think he was a nurse, but basically he went to me, cancer? Now, that's not the best thing to do, is it? Basically, you they take it back and say we've noticed this you've got a mole, you've got something weird like that. You want to know what it is, don't you? You won't go, it'll probably work out. If somebody's introduced that element of fear or doubt or stress or uncertainty in your life, you want to find the answers. You everybody does. It's a natural thing. People don't want to leave themselves open to danger. So this is how people tend to use knowledge. They tend to build it up and stuff like that. And it's not dissimilar from the signs and symbols of say what we're talking about with a Mercedes Benz. I know people that basically have got properly posh cars, Teslas and stuff like that. They can't really afford it, but that's their way of letting themselves know and everybody else know that they're doing all right. But it's really for themselves. It's really so that they can, do you see what I mean? And so in that same way of building that understanding of this means this, it's that psychological security that literally everybody craves. And again, this is what I'm trying to get across. It isn't anybody's fault. This has been done on purpose. I'm sure this has been done on purpose, say through a combination of people taking advantage of the situation, government agencies basically wanting to provide themselves with an alibi and create, like for example, at the minute, they're basically, well, I don't know whether they send the kids back. They stopped testing kids at school. They're now saying that we've got 50,000 cases a day. And they're like, with this plan B idea, they're not going to initiate it until they've created the scenario in the public where there's sufficient chaos for them to clamour for it. Do you know what I mean? So again, the government will be able to turn around and go, you begged for this. Don't come to us like and moan. We're just doing what you told us to do.
Yeah.
And that's the same position. Like with the herd immunity field, the people that are listening to Sunita Gupta and like think things like, viruses don't exist, the tests aren't suitable and stuff like that. That is to promote people into the school of thought of let it rip through society, which again is it's wanted by two sets of people: the donors to the Tory government who don't want the economy, and by the economy it doesn't mean me and you. It doesn't mean it means essentially, the Dow Jones, the stock exchange, like multi-millionaires moving stocks and shares and hedge markets and stuff like that. In 2020, just before the lockdown, right, before the UK lockdown, oil went into negative equity, where for a couple of days, the oil companies had to pay people the price of a barrel of oil to take oil off of them. That's never happened in the history of the world. It's completely unprecedented. I think we understand that the oil, the oil industry is one of the most important and largest, I don't mean important in a sense, I mean the most influential lobbying groups and most powerful lobbying groups in the entire world. That's not even a conspiracy, it's just well known. And what was the thing that they feared the most? They feared long lockdowns and people working from home. So basically what the UK government did was resist the lockdown for 4 weeks. We had a proper lockdown for 3 weeks. Then on the bank holiday Monday, Dominic Cummings came out, and then quite a lot of people started to not do it. And I understand, I get it, I totally get it, right? I understand, because again, it's like, well, if they're not doing it, why should we do it? And if they're not doing it and we're doing it, it looks like a con, it looks suspicious, it looks like they're trying to control us. And so I totally understand that. I totally get people's there you go. Like, that's a perfect example. But that's his way of letting you know that he's doing all right. Like, it's a status symbol, and that's what you're built up of. You're built up of internal and external symbols by the way that you understand yourself and you present yourself to the exterior world. And by utilizing these mechanisms, taking advantage of instinctual drives, you can be manipulated. That's not new. It used to be called advertising. It's just moved to a new mechanism. They don't use 45 cycles. That's the point that they turn the machine off. They use 21 cycles. This has all been completely looked at. 45 cycles is basically, it's the end point. They run it from 0 to 45. Anything above 36 is considered chucked away. They don't look at it. Anything from 36 down, what they do is they check what's called the assays and the primers. These are the things that basically initiate the fluorescent response from the PCR. Okay, and again, if it looks dodgy, they throw it out. But this is all monitored, and actually the average level of CT count that the positive response is found at is between 21 and 25. That was a piece of misinformation that came out of an NHS document, and I know the one you mean. It was spread around by Iconic. It says at the back it runs up to 45 cycles. If you actually look inside the document, it explains that basically anything above 35 is thrown away, and that 45 is the point that they turn the machine off. So it's like boiling a kettle if you only need it 70 degrees. Like it doesn't. You still just wait till it goes down to 70 degrees. So no, that's not true. But that is another very good example of a false premise. If you believe that they were running it at an exceptionally high and unusual CT count, then I totally understand, and it would be logical for you to assume that these tests were wrong and that they were producing, say, false positives based on the information that you've got. Unfortunately, that information was misunderstood, and again, that is actually No, they haven't at all. No, you're talking about they re-released. What they did was they re-released the guidance because that thing. Thank you, John. Like, this is the point. Like, if they were releasing false positives, you'd get the same rate of infection absolutely everywhere. That was a bit of misinformation that came from Michael Yeadon. Michael Yeadon is in bed with the Tory backbenchers of the ERG, who are connected to the donors. They're the people that have been pushing this herd immunity. He's also connected to Patrick Fagan. Patrick Fagan was one of the chief scientists, data manipulators on Cambridge Analytica. So again, this supposedly anti-government sentiment is coming from the government to force the public to tell the government what to do. Going back to the NHS owning up, they didn't. What they did, they've done it 3 times. They've re-released the same document, and the document says follow the instructions. It doesn't say lower the CT count. It doesn't say that there's false positives. Splitting hairs, let's see how panic would be different to flu and airborne swabs. 5 flu would be a pandemic. It's not. Okay, good. We've gone on to another false premise, a 0.03% fatality. This comes from the meme that basically there's a 99.97% survival rate. Nobody produces survival rates. A survival rate isn't a real thing because it very much depends. If you and I are very different, if we were both to get the same disease, there's a number of factors that might suggest whether you die. The only information that any agency puts out, this is the WHO, the CDC, ONS, and all the agencies, is what's called a case rate fatality. And a case rate fatality is how many people have caught it, and of those people, how many have died. So going on to what I said earlier about let's look at where that information came from. Where did that 99.9% come from? It came from an American study on one particular town in, I forget where, but it's somewhere in the southern part of America. And it wasn't a study on real life events. It was an estimation. And they didn't use case rate fatality, which is the way that you determine how dangerous a disease is. They used incident fate fatality. Now, what incident fate fatality, and the distinction is very important. Case rate fatality is if 100 people get it, how many people will die? Okay. Incident rate fatality is how many of those 100 people will get it, and then how likely is they to die? And that's based on a number of factors. And what they said was, if we lock down this particular town and follow this particular scenario, which included nobody coming to and from the sound, we think that the chance of catching it and then going on to die was 99.9%. It transpired that they were completely wrong. And in that particular place where they did that study, which wasn't a real study, it was a computer simulation, they actually found that the case rate fatality of the virus was about 14%. So 14% of people that got it died. And that is basically where that meme has come from. Because they have to die in a hospital setting, and basically the coroner goes over it. So there is lots of incidents actually where people have died 28 days in that scenario in hospital with COVID, and they've still not been added to the actual death toll because they've determined
on the website. On the website, I've seen where it says any death, all deaths within 28 days of
yes, no, it does. It absolutely does.
Test.
It does, but there is a caveat to that basically it's overlooked by a doctor, and it has to be in the scenario in a hospital or a care home setting. Again, this is what's called there's a difference, right? There's 3 different ways of finding the numbers. The first thing is an IO7-1. So that is what you're describing. 28 days after a positive test died in a care home or a hospital setting. And that is the number that is put out on the news. Now, even in the IO7-1s, what happens is afterwards, a separate doctor looks at it and determines whether it was the cause or not. And they actually track both of those. So they say basically these IO7-1s where it definitely killed them, and that is that by removing. No, that wasn't true. It was, yeah, that was on for that was in Australia. It was a motorcycle accident, and it was on for all of a day, and it got found and taken off, because this is the procedure that I'm talking about. Afterwards, those are double checked. They're double checked. Those people died, so numbers are putting out are meaningless. No. That's again, that's not true at all. Again, you have to die in a specific.
You can't. I mean, 100,000 people die each year within 28 days of having a haircut. They don't put haircut on the. Yeah, that's the point he's trying to make, I think.
Exactly.
But you know, when you're talking about the Mercedes Benz and the F-15 fighters and comparing the Wright brothers to a fighter, I think that's a similar sort of analogy. So
it's not a meaningful comparison, right? Like. Now, so there's three ways. There's the IO71, that's the one that they put out, and even the IO71 is redacted. They go over it and basically go, yes, even though they died within this criteria, we don't think it's added to the thing, and that's why basically it fluctuated from 140 down to 130 at the beginning of the year, because this is what happens. It's checked. Now, there is a second way of looking at it, which is called IO72, and that is suspected deaths. So basically, that's people that have died in any scenario, at home with a test, or in any situation without a test. Now, that's the IO72. Now, obviously, that's a lot higher, because the criteria is far, far broader to fit into that category. So that is actually the higher number. The IO72, when it was like 120,000 on the news, the actual IO72s, the suspected, was about 150,000. Now, if they wanted to scare us, if they wanted to hype the figures, why are they using the lowest possible number?
What, COVID number?
Yeah.
How do you work that out?
Because in the ways that they've just described, IO71, IO72, and the redacted IO71, the one that they've gone for is the redacted IO71, which is the third highest figure of deaths. So if the government wanted to use that daily death toll to scare us, why wouldn't they use the highest death toll? Why would they use the lowest possible death toll? Because
the reason why when you go in shoplifting or something like that, you always steal something small rather than walking out with a great big, great big massive full.
My mum used to work at the electricity. My mum used to work at the electricity board. You know the thing that got nicked the most? Microwaves and hob surfaces. I don't even know how what you do with a hob surface, but the proper electric hobs, they used to get nicked all the time. But again, it doesn't dictate. This is the point. There's an incongruence with the logic. If the logic is to scare us enough to lock us down, why use the least scary measure?
Well,
it doesn't make sense, does it?
I don't know that they do. I mean, we know.
Well, they do. Well, for the sake of this conversation and argument, let's assume that
statistics.
Well, for the sake of this argument, let's assume that I've looked into it and actually done my due diligence. If you wanted to scare the population into submission, why would you use the least scary figure? Just hypothetically, let's forget reality. Or could it be that that's a false premise? That basically, I understand why it seems like that, but could it be that that's not actually what they're trying to do? That what they're actually trying to do is make it look like the government did better. Because although there's us in the alternative media that are always wary of these types of things, the news isn't aimed at us, is it? It's aimed at the mainstream. It's aimed at normies. It's aimed at those people. And so what they're trying to do is convince the normies that actually we've not done nearly as bad as all these naysayers want to make out. That's the more logical way of looking at it. And particularly when, again, you then look at where the misinformation is coming from, which is those government agencies, the Nudge Unit, Surgru Communications, and excuse me, the HM Treasury, Economic Insight, and then organisations like the Great Barrington Declaration, PCR claims, and various other groups like that, who are all connected directly to the government donors. Why
why would you need a nudge unit if you're if there's a deadly pandemic? You know,
Well, the nudge unit is well. This is the point. The nudge unit is telling you the opposite. The nudge unit is releasing the information that basically says that's where it's the Surgu communications. It's the Sunita Gupta. It's all of those doctors that are saying we don't need masks, we don't need lockdowns. That information is coming from the nudge unit.
Right, and there's not very many people saying that we don't need masks and we don't need lockdowns.
Well, there's lots. There's Julia Hartley Brewer. There's Lawrence Fox.
It's not mainstream media, really, is she?
Absolutely, it's mainstream media. The Times, yes, absolutely. The Times, the Telegraph, the Daily Mail, the Express, the Sun, Sky News Australia. They've all been vehemently opposed to lockdowns, masks, and working from home right from the start. You've got columnists like Peter Hitchens, and what is the connecting thread that runs through all of those? It's Rupert Murdoch, the Barclay brothers, and the other guys, the Northcliffes. And what are they? They're two things. They're also connected to the oil industry, and they're also the Tory donors.
Yeah.
So that, do you see what I mean? So that is why it is in the interest of the good, like the government. I say, the government wants to pretend that nothing's happening, everything's just fine. They don't want to admit any fault. That has been the Conservative Party line forever. Do whatever and pretend that everything's fine. Pretend that the NHS is fine, even though they've been destroying it for years and years. Pretend that welfare is fine, even though they've been crippling the most vulnerable people in society for years and years and using them to blame. Like they are the party of gaslighting. That is what they do to get what they well, just advertising. But again, I don't think this is another thing about vaccinations. I don't think you need to manipulate. Again, you need to manipulate people within the alternative media and conspiracy media to get a vaccine, because basically they're opposed to vaccines for whatever reason. I'm not particularly, but that's the thing. The majority of mainstream people aren't really opposed to vaccines. They see them as just a medicine. So you don't really need that much manipulation to do stuff like that.
Well,
like the manipulation
there is that much manipulation because there's incentives. They're doing on about doing it in nightclubs now. You know, you haven't got your COVID passport, we'll tax you and you can go in. Yeah.
I was just literally about to say that basically, particularly on the continent, what they've done is they've used the concept of the vaccine passport. It's not because it's a brilliant tool on its own. It's literally to coerce people, for want of a better word, into getting that vaccine, because basically, but it's not seen by the people in the mainstream as coercing them to get something bad. It's seen by people in the mainstream, from people that I've spoken to, as to get them off their lazy arses. It's not like trying. Do you see what I mean? Whereas we're coming from it, or the audience might be coming from the perspective of being coerced into doing something that they don't want to do. The mainstream perspective, as far as my understanding goes, is that they're being coerced into doing it because they simply can't be bothered to do it. Not that they're against it or opposed to it, but because fundamentally they're lazy. So because that is
more in their lives. You know, you're a young person.
Exactly. Yeah, you've absolutely hit the nail on the head.
I agree that could be a valid reason. I'm just asking. I'm asking the questions that people.
No, you're absolutely right.
And listen, it's really, it's a fucking hour. Where's that gone? Wow. We've done an hour anyway. You're listening to Raconteurs News with me, Jason Holmes. Untwisted, unsweetened news, particularly unsweetened tonight. We've got Neil Sanders, one of my favourite guests, because I like a good row. Although I hardly get a word in, but you know, it's Neil Sanders, for God's sake. So yeah.
I'm not round with you, Jason.
Everybody, you know what everybody's asking in the chat room. Now, we asked you before, and I wanted to make the point that in your article that you didn't make any mention of the V word.
Vaccines. Because I'm not opposed to vaccines. I had the vaccine ages ago. I looked into it. As soon as I was satisfied that it had gone through exactly the same phase 3 trials, animal trials and human trials as every other piece of medicine, I decided, fine, I'll have it. Part of it was because a friend of mine had a stroke and I wanted to go and visit him in hospital as well. And that just made it easier. As it transpired, I never actually got to go and visit him. But I would have had it regardless, because I'm not anti-vax. I've actually read Andrew Wakefield's thing. It's shite. He presents no evidence. He's a charlatan and a fraud that wanted to produce his own measles vaccine, and he has zero evidence to back him up. So I don't, me personally, now if you disagree, that's fine. Go nuts, and you're your own sacred sovereign person, so I'm not telling you to do anything, and I wouldn't force anybody to do anything that they don't want to do. But I don't buy any anti-vax argument, like, and so being as it's gone through the protocol, the same protocol as every other medicine, then basically I don't care. Like, I'll have it. Like, if you doubt the vaccine protocol, then fine, that's fine. Perhaps you've got a very good reason to, but my personal opinion was not. I'm just not into any of that. I don't buy it as a.
I will.
Sorry. So let me just clarify. Sorry. Do I believe that there are some poor souls out there that have received damage from vaccines? 100%. And you have my absolute sympathy. And I do actually believe some people that vaccines in the past have caused like more damage than people than the public would know, and that people deserve answers to that. But there's damage to all medicines. My mum will die if she takes penicillin, literally die if she takes penicillin. That doesn't mean that penicillin is bad. So that was my decision. And that's how it went, because it wasn't even a big deal thinking about it. The second that basically went through the same protocol, and I discovered that a lot of the stuff that again was coming out in the media, it's got graphene oxide in it, it's got nanobots in it. So it's like, this is nonsense. This is not true. So I had it.
Well, I just wanted to say that last time you came on, when I asked you, will you take the vaccine? Because I think back then
you said probably not, because it wasn't.
You said no.
Oh, did I? Well, since then,
if I was I'd have dug that clip out and done it.
Oh no! Well, you know what?
No. What I'm trying to say is, if I was trying to,
I had this conversation with somebody the other day. Like, at the time, my position was probably no, I don't want the vaccine. Since then, I've discovered that my reasons for not wanting the vaccine, they weren't real, they weren't true. Like,
you'll be accused of not having it now, won't you?
I don't give a shit. What do you mean, though? So? What? Because I'll be accused of not actually having it, but pretending that I've had it, thus threatening to alienate myself from all of your watchers in a bizarre double bluff to
look, it was just a
no, Jason, I'm positive that you're right. Because that's the thing. People will go, mental gymnastics. Let me reiterate: if you don't want it, don't have it.
No,
don't have it.
That's me. I just don't feel I need it. And
no, fine. And I wouldn't criticize you for that. That's fine. You're your own person, and it's none of my business what you do, what you put in your body, and you may have incredibly good reasons that I'm not aware of.
They're all watching me now and saying things about me.
Are they?
Oh yeah. God, I was just the vaccine issue.
Yeah.
Like I said, what I was going to say was, if I wanted to, get you, as it were, set you up, and I could have asked you if you've got the vaccine and had the clip ready, but I hadn't had the clip ready. I've not even looked at the clip. I just remember, because I remember people.
I'm sure you're right. And I'm sure at the time that's exactly what I felt. But this is sort of what this show's about. You alter your perspective as you get new information. If I based my entire life on everything I thought when I was 18, I'd be right, fuck up. Like, do you know what I mean? But at the time, I was positive I was right. And again, that's a silly like comparison, but it's kind of the same thing. You have to adapt, particularly like with regards to like, how these things like J-Trig work. and spreading misinformation and stuff like that, is because we're on the internet talking about it all the time. We're on the we know that the government does dodgy things, right? Okay, we know it's common knowledge, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is probably why people are surprised by your stance on this.
Well, hang on. Well, let me explain. Well, don't you think don't you think that they know that we know?
Yeah, well, of course they do. Yeah, of course they
do. So if they know that we know, that makes it even easier for them to go, well, I know how you'll react. All I need to do is drop this thing. If I can drop something at the minute, all you need to do is drop something and vaguely connect it to George Soros, Bill Gates, or Prince Andrew, say, and everyone will lose their fucking shit about it for 6 months. They'll go, oh, this is obviously real, blah, 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 because it hits your triggers. It's marketed to specifically go at you. This is why, again, things like QAnon took off so very, very well. So what it's vital to do is every bit of evidence is to look at it and to see if it's true. And I tell you, when I started doing this, I started it when I started getting into the Manson book, because I was convinced that it was a satanic cult. And I was convinced that it was connected to the Process Church of Final Judgment and possibly even MK Ultra. And so, I'd been convinced of that for years. I knew that was what it was. When I was writing the book, I was coming across evidence that showed that couldn't possibly be the case. So I had to change my mind. I used to be of the opinion, again, that basically, Brexit was a good idea and that a lot of these things were true, until I started finding out about Cambridge Analytica, and then I changed my view. I discovered that this was actually propaganda, that this was coming directly from MI5. And so this is the problem, is that, and this again ties back to social media and the concept of audiences and something like that. People gravitate to you as a person because they agree with you, or because they like the way that you think, or whatever. Okay, so if you've come out and said, I think X, and then the audience comes to you because of that, and then you go, actually, X, I don't think I think X anymore, I think Y, you're going to alienate a huge amount of that fans. And so I get it. I understand why there is that want to be rigid. Certain people have been saying the same speeches on different channels, saying exactly the same shit for 10, 15 years, exactly the same shit, right? Okay, because that's their brand. That's their brand. And again, this is coming across as a criticism. It's not a criticism. This is how life is, right? It's difficult to change your brand. So I understand why people are cross with me and stuff like that. But there's no malice of forethought. Like, what gets me is a lot of people say, but you know about mind control, Neil. How could you have fallen for this? It's like, well, maybe I've used that knowledge of mind control to actually overlay it across what's happened. And I've noticed a pattern that perhaps you haven't noticed. And because I don't have that weekly thing, I did. I didn't actually see all that. I saw the bit where you pulled him up for saying that he'd ate horse dewormer. Can I just hang on, I'll come back to that in a second, because I was just wanting to finish my point. I do apologize.
It's fine.
I don't have that. I don't have a weekly following. I pop up and do this and throw a book out, and I'm on Facebook arguing with people and blah, 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 blah. It would be far more difficult for me to have this position if I had a weekly audience that I was concerned would abandon me. Like if do you see what I mean? Because so in many ways, people are kind of forced into this thinking. It's like kind of being in a religious sect. You can't stand up at church on Sunday and go, water into wine. This is fucking bollocks, isn't it? It won't go over. They won't like it, and so that's
you won't have it, will they?
No, but that's almost what I'm doing. But I'm not doing it with any malice. I'm doing it because I've thought of the next step and how this might be utilized. Just going back to that thing about invectiment, there's actually a load of people on my timeline that are genuinely. I know that people are being smeared. It's this sort of a horseworm, blah, blah, blah. Now, the reason that is what came out is invectamine is an anti-parasitical drug that is available on prescription in America. Now, in order to get it, you need it from a doctor. Now, the doctors aren't prescribing it at the minute, so you can get a horse version. But you need to take far, far more than is usually prescribed in order for it to have any effect at all. And there's been a number of guys on my timeline, this is absolutely true, Jason, that have been buying the horse paste, the actual proper horse medicine that is in Vectamin, figuring out what is the safe human dose or whatever, and then taking a regime of it up to like 2 weeks. And you know what the common thread that's run through every single one of them? They've all shit themselves violently. Like properly. They've all been on there going, I've got the runs. One person described it as, I passed about 4 gallons of black bile. Now, again, this perhaps at that point you want to stop, because that's your stomach lining and deoxygenated blood coming out. Like, so yeah, but yeah, so that was my point, is that there is a degree of rigidity, and but again, it's not really, I don't blame people, because it's kind of like if you're a band, like, okay, let's say you're a band and you've been doing this same set for years and years and years, and all your new fans have come to you and they expect you to play that same set, that same thing. They want to see the hits, don't they? And this is the problem that bands fall into. This is the problem that everyone falls into. Do you keep churning out exactly the same stuff, or do you progress? Because if you progress, you're going to alienate the people that only know you for that. Now, does that mean that you should never progress? Again, there is no right answer, Jason. There is no right answer.
You're right. There is no right answer. But the scenario that you're describing can go either way. You know, if they're manipulating both sides, that's not to say that the COVID is real, and the vaccine is safe, or it's it's even
no, but we can only work
for humans.
Absolutely.
They're double bluffing us both.
No, absolutely. So all we can do is we need to drop the speculation, drop the assumptions, and look at the empiric evidence. That's all we can do. Not what do we think, what do we know? And that's what I've tried to do, is look at what we know, and not come at it with any preconceived ideas. Like, again, do I think that COVID is this is the thing where I think a lot of people misunderstood my thing. Yeah, I think it's real. I think it can be nasty, but this should have been done ages ago. The reason it wasn't done was because the UK government and certain other governments went, oh, it's not that bad. They weighed it up and they figured it would be less expensive to just let it rip and say go for herd immunity than to actually deal with it. And they were wrong. And since then, they've basically it's been shite. Everything's been shite because they've been pretending that they didn't make a mess. They're not even trying to fix it properly. And that's where the problem comes in. Now, do I think it's a world-ending event? No, not even close, right? Do I think that everybody will get it, will die? No, not even close. I don't even think that everybody will get it will be that ill. Like, but here's the thing, going back to what you were saying about the hospitals again and the death rate and stuff like that. I think this is something that people have misunderstood, because again, the messaging has been appalling. The problem with COVID or SARS-CoV-2 has never ever been that it kills a lot of people. That's not the problem at all. Nobody has ever said that that's the problem. And again, this is a fundamental misunderstanding of why measures are required. It's not to stop lots of people from dying from COVID. It's because if you have 10 beds in a hospital, right, those 10 beds can be used for any manner of things, right? Normal operations, blah, 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 etc., etc., etc. They are the facilities that they have to treat people. If you have someone that goes into hospital with COVID, one person takes up 3 beds. Why? Because of the contagion, they need to put an exclusion zone in. And because you only have a finite amount of staff and beds, the problem is the more people that you have in a hospital that need some sort of containment, the less of that hospital is available to treat your normal, everyday, average person, or even serious operations and stuff like that. And so when they talk about protecting the NHS, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about keeping it under that peak where they can't function normally. And that is the problem that they've been looking looking towards. And this is the cruelness of this is that the NHS was already on its fucking arse, right? It's already, probably more than anybody, how difficult it is to get things and how long it takes and how slapdash the service is, not because the people involved in it or the ideology of the service is wrong. It's because it's being fucked from all angles and being mismanaged again for this very point, because the Tories don't give a shit. They don't give a shit if the hospitals are overrun. They don't give a shit if people are dying in the car park from other things that can't be treated because they can't get past the COVID ward. In fact, they want that. They actively want that to happen. Why? So they can privatise the NHS. And I know I keep repeating these things, but these are the fundamental things that the Conservative Party wants to do. It wants to destroy the NHS so that it can privatise it to a series of American companies that are connected to the IEA, which is a think tank in the UK, and the Heritage Foundation. It's not even shy about this. It repeatedly says that's what they want to do. And so to do this, they're going to create this scenario where lots and lots of where the service gets to the point where basically everyone is sick to death of it, and will just like anything. Again, same sort of Tory policy. You asked for this, don't complain later, and that is what they will actually do.
For fuck's sake, you've got to fucking tell Cocky what you think of James Corbett. I don't know why he needs to know, but he needs to know. James Corbett.
He's a fucking cunt. James Corbett? Sorry, no. James Corden. I thought you meant that big fat blonde guy off the telly. James Corbett. Sorry.
James Corbett's got. I'm going to cut that and send it to him.
I did. I thought you meant James Corden, the guy who does the chat show in America. Sorry, I hate him. James Corbett, I don't know. I loved his stuff on 9/11. Is that the guy with the glasses?
I think he lives in Japan.
Yeah,
he did
that 5-minute thing on 9/11 that was absolutely astonishingly great. It was really, really good. I like his stuff on 9/11. I don't really follow him really because I may be mistaken, but I thought that he sort of was kind of on the Trump train a little bit, and was kind of like, maybe wrong about that, but no, I don't really know anything about him. But I certainly don't think he's a fucking cunt.
Well, I do. I'll think he's a fucking cunt for you. But
I don't know enough about it to formulate an opinion, other than he did that film. If I'm thinking of the right person, it was like 9/11 explained in like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And
he's done some good stuff.
Brilliant, absolutely astonishingly, just like laser precision. Just salute for that piece of work.
Yeah, it's undeniably he's done some good work. A little bit like you tonight. You've done loads of what people in chat room and people. Many people in the chat room are thinking that you're a fucking cunt themselves.
How will I sleep?
No, this is the time. But you have done some previously good work. Like these.
But that's what gets me. Is that, like, Neil, you're an expert on mind control. Tell me your honest opinion on what's going on. Well, being an expert on mind control, I've looked at it dispassionately and I think this. Well, fuck you, Neil, because I don't agree.
Oh, listen.
One of us is an expert on mind control, and it's not you. So perhaps, just perhaps, I'm onto something. I mean, I was completely right about Brexit, 100% right about Brexit. Everything that I said was going to happen has happened. Right? The only thing that hasn't happened yet is we haven't gone out on no deal. And we're angling to do that right now by breaking the Northern Ireland Protocol. Everything else that I said would happen, happened.
There we go.
And no one believed me on that either. Everyone thought I was a fucking cunt about that as well. Like, because they were on the false premise of the Lisbon Treaty and Napoleonic law and the first stage towards a Nazi New World Order and all this stuff. And then they believed the crap that came out about, like, you know, that came through Cambridge Analytica. So, you know, I've got the receipts.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I mean, there's a lot of different twists to this that people are bringing up in the chat room, like how the global warming, climate change, whatever you want to call it, agenda seems to be hyping up. UFOs have been in the news, but one question I just wanted to ask, right? Is this stuff strong enough? Is this crap that what you're saying is crap that we're being fed in the alternative media, or you know, at least fueling in the alternative media? Do you think that's powerful enough for people to actually pack their jobs in? Because there has been cases of people that have, you know, ministers that have quit and said it's you know, and so you think, well, she's actually put her money where her mouth is.
Yeah, it will absolutely. Yeah, it gives people, yes, it's that powerful. I mean, we've seen it. You know, we've seen people basically are convinced that they don't want to take the vaccine, so they're going to quit the nurse's job or the care home job or whatever. And you know, maybe they've got a very good reason for it, but a lot of the things are basically not true. Again, like, they'll repeat the same tropes that I'm talking that some of them come up tonight. The PCR tests don't work. It's comparable to the flu. It's got a 99.9% survival rate, and you know, if you believe those arguments to be true, then your position is absolutely valid. But the problem is those positions aren't true. That's it. And you can go back to the source of where these ideas first formulated, and you can check them through yourselves, and you'll see that, oh, okay, it's not real. But again, I get it. Like, if you believed that, say, if you even believe that it's something like on the very extreme of the scale that viruses themselves don't exist, then of course you wouldn't kowtow to any of this nonsense, because it's stupid to. So yeah, but this is the point. It's incredibly powerful, right? I didn't mention this earlier, but I should have done. It goes back to the concept, which is in that very first book. Okay, this is entirely my point in the Black Book. It's called Painting Pictures in People's Heads, right? And this is how Walter Lippmann, who was one of these elites, illuminists that was connected to Edward Bernays and also to the CIA and various think tanks that basically control how the elites, you know, control the world. And he was very much of the opinion, this fellow, that all the average person, they're not clever enough to think for themselves. They shouldn't be participants in world or decision making. They should be observers. And the tactic that they decided that they were going to use for this was called painting pictures in people's heads. And so the idea is basically that most people don't, like, aside from your personal existence, you get your understanding of the broader world and everything through sort of what's called informed knowledge. So other people telling you about it, you reading about it in a book, you seeing it on a television program or something like that. Okay, like, you've probably never seen a Komodo dragon, but I'm pretty sure that you know what a Komodo dragon is. And you can think of innumerable like things where basically you've got that. Now, what he said was that basically, if we can paint that picture first, if we can get in on that feed and tell them what is what, then we've got them. And the examples that he used was basically, if we show that the earth is flat, then someone will go and searching for the edge of it. He says that if we basically gave somebody a lump of yellow metal and told them it was gold, he'd act delighted as if it was gold, only later to find out that it wasn't gold at all. So this is the same thing. If you can paint these pictures in people's heads, if you can explain to people what's happened before it happened, then that's the way that they can get you. Now, the way that they used to do this was basically attacking the mainstream, because the mainstream, because we were on the telly, we weren't on the internet. So basically you got all your information through a finite number of channels. So it would be things like a terrorist, what's the description of a terrorist, and that would come through. Can you remember when basically all the films suddenly switched from Russian baddies to Afghan baddies, and so basically that sort of fed into the narrative of the war on terror, and that basically it's justified to shoot anyone that's brown because he's a terrorist, and we know he's a terrorist because we've seen it in the films. Yeah.
Let's go back to Russian now.
yeah, well, precisely. But this is the point, exactly. But now, this is the thing. We've got more nodes. We've got more people. And there's an active conglomerate of groups of people on the internet that have made it their life's work and have made it very, very apparent that they're going to unearth these falsehoods. They're going to basically hold the government to task. So how do you control that group? You attack them instead of the mainstream, because the mainstream is now compliant. The mainstream isn't looking at any of this. So that's not the group that you need to worry about. You need to worry about this group. Like, so what do? You turn things like social media programs like Cambridge Analytica and SMISC and Sentient World Simulation. You turn it onto them. You get them into their own echo chambers. You introduce Flat Earth and QAnon, and the Queen is dead and everything is fake. And you cause dissension between those groups. You cause ridicule from the outside. You polarize and cause that separation to the point where basically now you've got active, you can't bring up anything. You know, it's an extension of the word, because, you know, basically they used to say, we'll use the term conspiracy theorist as a way to slight anybody that's going against the CIA. Well, now basically they'll use the same thing, but they use QAnon or like COVID denier or whatever, and it's tying everything in. So you can't have a platform about anything now in the mainstream, because it's demonized our sphere to such an extent that basically that gap is you can't bridge it anymore. Now here's the cruel thing about that. Because of this polarization, what does that do? It drives people more to their groups, into their echo chambers, because in your echo chamber you've got comfort. If you want to go back to the mainstream, you're going to be ridiculed. And so that's how it works.
I've got to put this up on screen. It's just it's funny. He's been doing this all night. He's been doing this all night about everything of different.
Good lad.
Different. Right. Quite back to the Webby's just brought something up.
Yeah.
This John O'Looney. And I was put off by the name.
No, I know.
What do you make of him? I mean, he's.
I think that he's decided that he wants some attention. Like the logic of what he's saying, I don't doubt that he's telling the truth about his situation. That basically he didn't see any deaths, and then basically, like at a time when he was supposedly seeing less deaths, he actually saw more deaths. But the logic of that is like me going down to. I went to Sainsbury's earlier, right? Okay, no one in there. Right, I was in there for an hour. I was the only customer, so I'll deduce from that no one shops.
No, but it was also talking about colleagues that worked at different firms. You know, they have associations. They work.
I get that. But
because
I understand that. I get that. I phoned my mate. He was in Aldi, right? There was no one in Aldi either, except for him.
But that's strange. It's a strange analogy to make. It's not.
It's what I'm saying is that in isolation, like, it doesn't mean anything. I don't care if he's phoned 20 people. You know what he needs to do? He needs to phone every single one.
It's not phoning them. He's talking about associations.
He's got his association with his group. Yeah, but he needs to speak to every association from every single part of the country. And until he can present that information, it's just speculation.
Yeah, but that's not how things work, though, is it? I mean, if you take a television audience, it's taken from a small group of people, and then they make the assumption of how
which is why it's but Jason, but that's why that is wildly inaccurate.
Well, the TV companies would argue differently, wouldn't they?
Well, no, they wouldn't. They wouldn't.
You take a straw poll of anywhere, and you'll get a picture of the whole.
Okay.
A portion of the whole picture. All you've got to do is expand that picture to the entire country.
But you've just hang on. You've just done your own argument, because I've said that's not accurate. Okay, and you said yes, but the television companies would tell you that it is accurate, but it's not, is it?
It's what? I don't know.
It's not accurate.
I've no idea if the TV
Exactly.
things are accurate
And
or
it's
not.
the same thing with
It's
John
the
O'Looney.
way that things are done. That's the way that they do things. And I've been.
It doesn't matter if that's the way that they do things. What matters is what you can prove. And if you can show,
prove to you
No.
by the same level, I can prove to you that 18 million people watch the X Factor on whatever day.
I don't think you're understanding.
Just a second,
Yeah.
right? I can tell you that, and you can tell me how many people died of COVID from the same thing. You're getting the information from the same source as I'm getting the information from.
No, that's the difference. Okay, because
it's not the difference, is it? It's just written down on pieces of paper. It's the trust in that organisation that you need to be able to think that those. I'm going to talk. I'm going to talk. You're not talking over me. I'm going to talk for a minute. But the information that they take is the same.
No, it's not. And I'll tell you for what.
ITV are showing us the figures because that's what they want to show us, right? They want to show us those figures, and so are the government.
Where do those
figures? Using those figures
when
when you don't trust the source, admittedly.
Right. Yes, but you're talking about two completely different sources, one of which extrapolates and one of which collates evidence. And that's the difference. That's the fundamental difference. One of them makes a guesstimate based on a small group. You're talking about Nielsen ratings, yes? Right.
Well, in America, they call it that, yeah.
Yeah. Right. They extrapolate. Of course, the companies want you to think that's accurate in the same way that John Looney wants you to think that's accurate.
And in the same way that the government wants you to think that that's accurate.
No, because it's a different way of collating information. If I say, based on my looking around this room, everyone in the world, likes Venom as a band, right? That's an extrapolation. If I ask everybody in the world, that's collating evidence, and that's the difference. There is receipts for what I'm talking about. There is no receipts for what John Looney's talking about. It's pure speculation. It's all in my article. It's all in my article.
I've read your article. It shows, right, information. It doesn't matter. I mean, if they
well, I've also included the sources.
They didn't want you to know the information. It wouldn't be in there, would it? They
go and check.
As you've said already, they've made a lower estimate of
the government have
to make it look like they've done a better job.
But
therefore, they're massaging the figures.
No.
To make themselves look better. So
Jason, you've just done your own argument again, because this is entirely my point. The news media. No, listen to me, and you'll find out. The news media and the government are telling you one thing, right? Well, I've gone and checked with the ONS. Right? The ONS is telling something very different to what the government's saying. The ONS is saying that the government's done really, really badly. The government is massaging figures. The government's saying, it's done fine, it's all right. And that's where the problem comes in. That's what piqued my interest, was that, hang on, the official stats actually are much worse than what the government says. I know that we're all in the mindset of thinking the government are hyping it, but the actual empiric evidence shows quite the opposite.
What would you say to the argument then? Let's just move along for sake of our our listeners and our own voices. For fuck's sake, you know, I fucking forgot. I was going to say, what would you say? Oh, that's correct. What would you say to people that claim, and this is a claim that I see often, as in the alternative media and memes about it, about flu deaths last year being a lot lower and all being included in the COVID?
No, they weren't included in the COVID thing. Because again, if you look at the way that it is actually checked, there's lots of checks and balances to make sure that it's accurate. Okay, what happened with flu last year in 2020? Was the flu season goes up to March, which is just about the time that people started dying from COVID. Up to March in 2020, there was about 8,000 flu deaths. And then basically since then, there's normally about 15,000 a year. So to say that there was none was not true. But what was true was that the following flu season, which starts in about October and over the summer, there was basically no flu, and that's absolutely true. But the reason for that is because flu is quite different to coronavirus in as much as basically flu dies in the cold, and it's not as hardy, it doesn't transmit as well. Where you usually catch flu is on the bus, on the train, in the office, in school.
It does transmit then.
Yeah, well, of course, but not as far as COVID. COVID is worse. So basically, because we weren't in the office, because we weren't on the buses, because we weren't at school, people weren't catching flu. It's as simple as that. Now that people have started going back to the office and stuff like that, people have started catching flu. And again, I understand what people would say about basically like flu and coronavirus have got similar symptoms, like sore throat, headache and stuff like that. But coronavirus has actually got distinct symptoms. Essentially, the one that basically it shuts down your immune system. If it goes too far, it basically your lungs burst. They fill with like blood clots, and it looks like it's best described as like a glass has exploded inside your lungs. It like literally shreds through your lungs, and it can cause neurological damage. It's causing kidney damage and stuff like that. And so, whilst they have similar symptoms, it's not the same. It's basically a bit like saying like a meringue and a pie are the same thing because they both contain eggs. Like there are similarities, but there are actually there's huge distinctions. But that's absolutely right. It's absolutely true that basically flu practically disappeared. But that's because, as I say, the places where we normally catch flu, we weren't going to.
If flu sort of dies, the virus dies in cold weather. And I've heard this before. I heard. I know it sounds strange.
Why is it always around at winter and not summer?
Yes. Why is it always around at winter? It's not summer. But I did hear about years ago. A friend of mine had birds. He had birds of prey. He used to fly them and take them to shows and things like that. And he had a snowy owl, and the snowy owl just died really suddenly.
Oh, and
he said it was it was due to getting a virus because it lived in a cold environment. There were no viruses, so it didn't need any protection from them. So I have heard that before. Yeah. So why is flu season in the winter then?
No idea. You'd have to ask a virologist. Like, I don't know. Maybe it's because the cold means that we're more susceptible to it. Like, I don't know. Maybe if it was, maybe it is always around, but it doesn't start to affect people until we get cold enough for our immune systems to be compromised. I'm guessing. I've no idea. I don't know. We could look it up. Shall I look it up?
I mean, the virus is obviously getting stronger. I mean, because they're telling us that it's going to increase over the winter time. Now, if it's going to increase over the winter time, then it's got to be transmitted, and if it's going to be transmitted, it has to be airborne. So surely it would die because of the cold weather.
Well, it does. That's the point. It's why you don't tend to catch flu from in the outside, but it stays in your body, and then you sneeze it out or like spit, put it on surfaces. And as I say, usually it gets into air conditioning units. And so basically that's why you must have been, I mean, potentially not, but I'm sure people have been in the scenario where you're in an office and the front row, like Sandra gets it, then Tom gets it, then you can literally watch some sort of bug move its way down the office as everyone starts to get it. Like, so, yeah. And again, we've not been in the office. So we've not been in the situations where it would flourish.
Yeah, it is. It's a strange one for me because I'm
that's a good point. Like, why, if it dies in the cold, why is it seasonal in winter? Like, I'm sure there's a reason for it, but it is one of those,
Yeah. I do. All I'm trying to do is I'm trying to antagonize listeners. I'm trying to not lose any listeners, and I'm just trying to, just have a chat and not really argue and shout and things like we got earlier on. I mean, my wife's in bed next door.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's me that's shouting. She won't be able to hear you. She'll have TV on probably. Yeah. So, where, what do you see ahead then? I mean,
I don't know. Like, I mean, I know people are sort of like very anti-vaccine and stuff like that, but like as cases are rising, like hospitalizations, serious hospitalizations, and deaths have sort of plateaued, which is a good thing. Which is only a good thing. Like, and you know, we're pretty much back to normal at the minute. Like, my concern is that basically, like, whatever strategy the government takes, it's designed to exacerbate you and to make you annoyed. Like, and I get why everyone's sick of it, because I'm fucking sick of it, and I actually believe it's real. So if you don't believe it's real, like, I can totally understand your position and stuff like that. Like, what's going to happen is that the government will do fuck all until basically it comes to a point where people are begging for them to make some sort of action, and then they'll do something ineffectual, like Great Reset. Okay, but that's what I think. Great Reset. I tend to think. Can anyone explain to me what the Great Reset is, just in a succinct, like, you know, paragraph?
I think it's, you know, like when you had one of them tape recorders when you were a kid, and it had one of them like little wheels that went round and round, so you could find where your favourite song, how far away it were on the tape, and then they're pressing that button next to it. I think that's what I think a reset is.
My concern about the Great Reset is that people are struggling to explain what it is, how it'll come about, and what the purpose is of it. Aside from some sort of nebulous, oh, it's the New World Order, oh, it's world communism. It's not communism because it involves MasterCard, American Express, and a lot of the oil companies. Like, my concern about the Great Reset, what it is, it's rich elite bastards doing rich elite bastard stuff, and they're trying to portray themselves as that they give a shit. But it's nothing. It's just marketing and branding. And the World Economic Forum has been doing this ever since the dawn of time. Like, what they're trying to do is like promote. It's trying to sell billionaires as if they have a conscience, which they don't. But I don't think it's a coherent theory in as much as everybody. And I'll tell you for why. I tend to think that it's a bit like a QAnon thing, right? Because it started on 8kun. And it was promoted by the head of the Heartlands Foundation. Who is the head of the Heartlands Foundation? The head of the Heartlands Foundation, this is the first person that mentioned the Great Reset as a threat to normal people. Head of Heartlands Foundation is oil industry. It's fossil fuel industry. The next person to mention it was Laura Ingraham. Laura Ingraham is in the employ of Koch Industries and the Heritage Foundation. Who are they? Oil industry. Next person to mention it was Candace Owens. Who's Candace Owens in the employ of? Well, she basically works for the Koch brothers and the DeVos family, oil industry. The next person to mention it was Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson works for Rupert Murdoch on Fox News, and he's also paid separately by Koch Industries, oil industry. All the oil industry. Now, do I think that the people involved in the Great Reset are good guys or are doing anything that would be beneficial for you and I? No, but I think it's one of those, again, a bit of a red herring. It's not complete, so everyone's trying to figure it out, but it's not sort of tangible. And in a really, really oversimplistic way, I think that the purpose of it is kind of like QAnon. Look over here and don't look at what Koch Industries and Rupert Murdoch and the oil refinery industry and the Atlas Network and the CIA and the Heritage Foundation are doing. So that's my concern about it. Again, I'm totally open to any theory if someone can show me, but my like, you know, some evidence. Then yeah, fine. Okay, I was wrong about that. Wow, this is a big deal. But thus far, it seems really nebulous. It seems like one of these things where it's more a slogan and an idea than that allows you to sort of almost project your own concepts onto what it is. Because again, I've heard that it's a mass green revolution. It's, well, if you read the Great Reset book that Klaus Schwab put out, he basically spends all this time talking about, yeah, we really should do this and we really should do this. But fundamentally, what the World Economic Forum has said is, yeah, but for the time being, let's just stick with fossil fuels. Now they make noise like they're being altruistic and doing good stuff, but that's what rich bastards do. It's sort of on my radar, but I'm not. I'm a bit. I think that it kind of might be a bit of a red herring until someone can actually explain to me what it is.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I ain't got a clue. I mean, I'm just somebody who does this at night, and that's it really. And I've got a funeral plan, and I'm in loads of different lotteries, and I'm helping Alan, who has to, who's got bad eyes. There were a question here that I wanted to bring up. I noticed today on your Facebook, somebody asked about the Richard D. Hall latest episode, and then when you responded to that, said bye.
Did they?
Oh no, I can't remember. No, I think it was somebody who read the Rich Hall thing. I mean, what did you make of that?
I didn't think it was terribly strong. I've got nothing but utmost respect for Richard and Andrew Johnson and all of those people on Rich Planet. But it doesn't mean I have to agree with everything. But Richard's got content to put out. He's exploring these options. That's the point of what Richard does. Is he puts these things out, and you go, I agree with some of that. And I don't agree with that. Some of the like that, that's kind of the point of Rich Planet. Like, there's been loads of stuff on there that I think that's brilliant, like absolutely astonishing. And I think Richard is a brilliant. When the investigation that he did on Madeleine McCann is, it's like that's really sensational. But I don't tend to agree with Richard's stance. Respectfully, I don't tend to agree with Richard's stance on COVID. And a lot of the things that you said about it I've discussed in my article. But the problem again, I think, and again, if you're a fan of her, I'm sorry, but the woman that he's talking about, that Carrie Madej, right? She's not a fucking doctor. She's an osteopath, right? She wouldn't have the first fucking idea how to examine a vaccine. That's even before we've asked where she got all these vaccines and where she got the equipment to examine them so that she found these stuff in. Like, she's just making it up. It's just as simple as that. She's making it up because then people send her money on Patreon.
And Richard's picked up on that and popped it in there.
Richard's exploring options. Richard's entitled to put anything out that he likes, and he doesn't have to. He doesn't have to necessarily agree with what he's putting out. In fact, he's kind of in the position where he sort of has to put out stuff that he doesn't always agree with, because it might be true, and he doesn't want to come across as biased. So I don't know whether Richard strongly entertains that bit. I didn't see all of that show. I saw the bit where he was talking about the economic sort of dance, and I think there's an element of truth to that, in as much as basically, again, rich bastards will take advantage of what this is called disaster capitalism. And disaster capitalism happens whenever there's a disaster. So yes, some people's businesses are going to get scooped up, some people's livelihoods are going to get destroyed, and we're all going to get basically bum rate with tax afterwards, right? So it's horrific. But I still think that was more them making hay whilst the sun shine, making lemonade out lemons, rather than, right, let's invent a pandemic so that we can close down John's coffee shop. I don't think that's quite the way it happened. But on the whole, Richard's ace.
Salty's put a question in. I've just popped it up there. What about the BBC Halesmere programme? What's your thoughts on that?
What was that? Sorry.
The BBC Halesmere program. Rich covered it in his show, I think.
I don't know if I saw
the
that.
BBC, I think, did a pandemic using smartphones back in 2017, I think.
Oh, right.
A pandemic, sort of like how fast a pandemic would. It were a program, and it was based in a place called Hazelmere.
You can go to every single year on record, right, and you'll find a pandemic sort of exercise, an imaginary.
I think the point of this was that the contention is that the first actual COVID patient number 1 in the UK,
Right.
was from Hazelmere.
Oh no, yeah, he's wrong about that. That's not true. She's from Nottingham. Like, that was what they thought. They thought it was that person from Hazelmere. They've since discovered that it was actually an old lady from Nottingham.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, that I'm
Well,
just
again,
asking.
that's what that's what I've read. Like, you know, perhaps maybe I'm incorrect about that, but yes, I do remember that bit. Sorry, I do remember that because I thought, hang on, because I live in Nottingham, there was a thing in our local news which is called the Nottingham Post that talked about the patient zero, and that's why it twigged in my brain. I was like, hang on, I'm not sure that's true. So that's what I'd read. Whether that's Nottingham trying to get in on the action, that may well be true. Perhaps, but I'd read that it was actually Nottingham.
Right. Okay. Somebody else has got a question in here as well. I'm trying to find it.
When will he fuck off?
It's been going really fast tonight. And hello to everybody, and thanks for all your comments in the chat room. Even your bit of jab passports. That was the question. What's your thoughts on jab passports?
I have very mixed feelings about jab passports. Like, I can understand it on international travel because it's essentially a thing that's always existed for certain places. But here's the thing: I get why people are, because they're not like 100%. Like, it seems like papering over the cracks. Like, do you know what I mean? To me, it doesn't seem like it will solve the problem in any way. It's and the concern that I have is probably the concern that everybody has, is that basically Palantir are involved with it. Palantir are also connected to Cambridge Analytica, and they're going to steal all your data. And again, this is going to be used to market drugs and figure out the best way to privatize the NHS. If they can, like, you know, scan over your database, your NHS records with their algorithms and figure out that, oh, this is the department that we need to fuck up, or this is the do you know what I mean? This is the medicine that we need to raise the price on. That's really, really concerning. And on their own, they're not. It's not going to help. It's really just a sort of a gesture. And the other thing is that I'm under no illusion at all that they're really used as coercion's is not really the right word. It's a more get them off your lazy arse. If you want to go to a restaurant, you need to get vaccinated, and that's just a fact. They've, particularly in Europe, they've been used not because they'll be brilliant, but because it forces people to get, or moves people to get vaccinated. And again, I understand why people in our milieu would think that was really dodgy, but it's not aimed at you, is it? It's aimed at the mainstream, and basically it's not really to convince them to do something that they would think is dangerous. The distinction is to convince them to get up off their lazy arse. So whilst it's very, very grim to us and it seems like a real bad idea, like, or whatever, and like really coercive, it's more of one of those sort of manipulation things. But again, I have really mixed feelings because it doesn't work. Like, there was my mates went to a festival like in August, and it was all, you know, show your app, got to be tested beforehand, blah blah blah. Loads of people caught it inside there, like, you know. So this is the problem. Like, the other problem is that whatever the government is doing in regards to anything, they're not that bothered. They don't care if, like, society grinds to a halt. They don't care if the NHS gets fucked. They don't care if people die. They don't care if people have long COVID. They don't care if your kids get ill, right? They don't care if your business collapses. They're really not that interested in you at all. They care about two things: they plan to privatise the NHS and keeping their donors happy. That's it. That is literally it. And so that's kind of the perspective that you've got to kind of look at it at. That's the lens that you've got to look at it at.
So if when this all started, then the conspiracy theorists got it wrong. What they should have said is
they should have waited.
There will be a vaccine, and and because people won't get off their arse, they're going to force you to have that vaccine to do anything or any, because, you know, but
No,
people were saying that back then.
No, that's a total misrepresentation of everything I've
How
said.
did they know that people were going to be lazy and not be able to get off their arse?
Because people are lazy.
But they knew. People knew back then what was going to happen, and it came to pass. It's come to pass, which is why more and more people are becoming aware that there is another side to all sorts of different things.
Absolutely,
including this, right?
No, there's always that's the point. There's always lots and lots of sides. Okay, and so to come up with your position before anything happened in March of 2020, and then not change that position, regardless of the information that's come since then, that's silly.
But what information? I mean, there's
no. If you will, if you start,
because again, we talk about vaccine passports, and then I think people like Alex Jones have talked about FEMA camps and camps for people to be put in, and that for years and years and years. And you know, people will go, oh bollocks, that's fucking absolute bollocks, and it may very well be, right? But it won't just be then. What will happen is people who are unvaccinated are going to be excluded from certain parts of society, yeah? Which is a two-tier.
Well, actually, as far as I'm aware...
let me just make my point, please. Let me just make my point. People are going to be in... so the unvaccinated are going to be cast out from society. But then... it's the vaccinated and the people that haven't had the booster. They're gonna, their papers are gonna. I saw somebody who's today. I think it were on that program it's got them old bitches on BBC One on in the morning, and they do
Prime Minister Question Time.
Thing. No, they do that consumer thing.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah.
At 10 o'clock in morning. Anyway, it's got so this bloke were talking about his vaccine passport on his phone, and he said, and then the thing that said that it was okay, he said it disappeared.
Right.
And the guy said, yes, well, all you've got to do, because they were talking about holidays, that's what they were on about.
Oh, right, yeah.
About cruises and stuff like that, because they cover consumer issues for like elderly people that are watching TV at that time, that are not watching adverts for funeral plans. So it's then, he said it's disappeared. So then he's got, the bloke said, well, just go and get your booster and then it'll reappear again and then you'll be okay. And so if your thing is right, if your theory is right about the NHS, which I've got no doubt that they are trying to destroy the NHS, as somebody who's a user of the NHS, I had a fucking MRI scan on Saturday, and when they sent it me, and it said Western Park Hospital, I thought, I fucking shit myself because it's a cancer hospital. But anyway,
fucking ridiculous. Like, this is the point. You don't need to tell me that, mate. It's like
but what I'm trying to say is that then it's the people that can't be asked to get the booster jab. Their little tick disappears. They can't. They're excluded from society. And then when the NHS is privatised, the people that can't afford the booster jab, their little tick's going to disappear because they can't afford to have that. Now this is not.
That's a good point, actually. That's an interesting way of looking at it. Actually, the way that privatisation could lead to, really, really harming people like that. Yeah, that's an interesting point. This is why it's vital that we don't lose the NHS.
I completely agree with you. I've got nothing but admiration for the people that work there. The institution itself, I think, is corrupt, and we all know about managers and how many managers there are and how much resources are just wasted on crap. I know myself because I've had equipment, and when you it says please return the equipment, you take the equipment back. And you say, what do you do with that? Do you just like refurbish it and clean? Oh no, it just gets destroyed. And you know, what did I bring it back for? Do you know what I mean?
Oh, it's ridiculous, mate. Just to go to what I was going to say was that, and I know this is different in Scotland, and again, I'm not sure that I agree with it. I really don't think I do agree with what they're doing in Scotland. But as far as I was aware, the proposal in England, and I believe also in regards to travelling abroad, and it may have changed, but that certainly this was true when my friend went to abroad. You didn't have to have the vaccine; you just had to have a test, like within the last 72 hours. And to me, that doesn't seem too bad. Like I could get on board with what you're saying about the exclusionary from if you don't have the vaccine, but if the caveat was that, but if you have a test that shows that you're negative, personally, I would say
that won't be the caveat though. When it,
but it was that was the proposal for the UK's
it's a proposal,
passport,
but it'll not last,
which by the way doesn't exist at the minute.
It won't have. You and I both know whether you believe the pandemic and everything. Me and you both know that there is no way.
That's how my friend got. That's how my friend went to the Canary Islands.
Yes, maybe now, but they'll be withdrawn at some point. They'll be withdrawn because now you've had enough time to be able to get your jabs up to date. And then, like I said, they privatised it. You can't afford it. That's another section of society. Then what happens is, this is where the depopulation could come in. Then what you've got is you've got a sub-society that ends up like being barbaric and, killing each other and things like that. This is where it could lead. You can't blame people for thinking that this is a
no. You're always right to be wary. Like, I mean, that may be taking it to wicked extremes to a point, but I totally I get what you're saying about the privatization. That is another danger of privatization that is actually evident in America. This is a very good reason why we don't want to go down that path. Really don't want to go down that path because, as you quite rightly say, certain people, it destroys them. Like, they get ill and they have to sell their house or die, or they don't have a house, so they die. And sorry, excuse me, but so I'm 100% with you on that aspect of it. Again, I have very, very mixed feelings about vaccine passports because, again, like, for example, my mum's partner is paramedic. They have to have certain jabs, like hepatitis. They have to have regular HIV tests, etc., and that's just part of their contract. So the idea of some industries or some people that work in organ transplant and stuff like that have to have a large number of up-to-date vaccinations because you're dealing inside people's bodies and stuff like that. So I've mixed feelings about it. I've very mixed feelings. I don't like the idea of forcing people to do it, but again, I think that it's really circular. Like, you've got a lot of people that are never going to trust the authorities, and they've got good reason. They've got absolutely good reason. Like, so it's really difficult. It's very difficult. Like, this is kind of my point. Right? This is sort of why. It's never simple. Life's not like that. Life's chaos, right? And so this idea,
it shouldn't be.
Of course it shouldn't be. No, of course it shouldn't be. But that doesn't mean that overlaying simplistic concepts and structures in order to make life easier.
No, but even in this structure, it needn't be. It needn't be. So we've got a generation of people that all they know is. Celebrities that they've seen on internet, YouTube, and they're just dramas, and so they think that the drama is the part of the entertainment. Me and you having an argument will get more hits than whatever. I had two people on once and trying to get them to talk one and then other, but a fucking no chance. But I had the biggest audience we ever had because that's what people want. They like conflict.
Well, we knew it would. That's why we put it in the script, didn't we? We knew it. Like, that's why we put it in the script, eh?
Anyway, I think we'll finish there. We've done 2 hours. 2 hours.
Crikey! Brilliant.
Thanks a lot, anyway, Neil.
Thank you for inviting me on, Jason. Because even if you don't agree with me, right, okay, you at least give me a platform and gracious and polite, like, and again, just go and look at. I've collected the receipts. I've done all the working. Like, go and read the articles and look at it. And yeah, if you don't buy it, you don't buy it. Like, I'll cope.
Yeah, well,
I don't mean buy it. I don't mean like go and pay for it. I mean, like, and I'm not like, I'm speaking more generally, Jason. I'm not having a go at you, mate, dude.
Yeah, that's fine. Listen, it's fine. I don't think you're having a go at me. It's been brilliant chatting with you and shouting at you and being shouted at. And
I didn't shout, really. Like, I was just trying to. Did I?
You're a very, very difficult man to, once you get going, you just wind the thing and then you're away. And I appreciate that. Believe me, nobody wants to listen to me.
Like, can I just say, like, I've said this on the last 3 or 4 times that we've done this. You'll notice that, like, no one's been able to rattle me. Nobody's been able to change my position. Do you know why? Because I'm telling the truth. So I don't need to change my position. I could tell you, like, that's why none of these arguments have flapped me, because I'm telling the truth. I said that last time, I said the time before, I said the time before. I'm telling the truth.
There you go. And that on that note, we shall end the show. I'll be back tomorrow night for a after dark. Back tomorrow night after dark. That's usually when
Is it a bit blue for dads?
It's what? Sorry.
Is it a bit of blue for the dads?
Oh yes, yeah. The dads are. Kids are in bed. It's 9:30. See, and I get a bit. I get a bit at night. I get
frisky.
I used to drink. See, that's
right.
time I'd be pissed up and talking. But I mean, that's been most shows previous to me stopping drinking. But yeah, that's what it was. So
you look great, by the way, Jason. I'm really pleased that you're doing well as well, mate. Like, you do look really good. Like, I know I said that before we went on air, but you look great, mate.
Thank you. I feel great. I really do. Feel best I have for ages. And I've got my legs here. Look.
Does it fit now?
That's progress. No, I've got to have a new top.
No, you're joking.
It's 11th November. It's going to be ready. But
how can you not go one of the blades like Oscar Pistorius?
Because I'm a above knee amputee.
Oh, bloody hell!
He's below knee. That's the proper amputees. The below knees are nothing. It's the above knee. No, I'm only kidding. It's the above knee though. It's twice as. It's 100% more effort. It takes 100% more energy to walk. So, and that's a really big heavy thing. So, yeah, I'm getting it back on. Lovely. Well, thanks, Neil, once again, and thanks to everyone in the chat room. It's been marvelous this evening. It really has, and I really enjoy getting Neil on, because we don't want to live in an echo chamber, do we? And it's really important to at least look at somebody else's point of view.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Excellent. Right. Well, thanks a lot. I'll see you tomorrow night, everybody. Take care now. Bye then.